Shifting quite radically to a different part of the world. I'm going to present something about a small kingdom in southern Africa called Lesotho. I wish Donald Trump was here so that I could show him a little bit more about this country and that it's called Lesotho, not Lesotho. But anyway, moving on. Just to give you some context, large dams are becoming ubiquitous across the world. Since the 1950s, we've seen this increase up to around 60,000 dams. But they're also some of the most controversial engineering projects in the world, associated with large amounts of displacement, huge socio-economic impacts, as well as environmental impacts. And at the turn of the millennium, the World Commission on Dams formulated a report, and at that time, those impacts were deemed unacceptable. However, large dams are continuing to increase, and you'll see from this slide. This is just, I went onto the internet and just Googled new dams, and this all came up. As you can see, I mean, dams are very much on the agenda, particularly in the developing world. And what does that mean for recreational fisheries? In the developing world, we have examples of several large dams that support what we call tourism-based recreational fisheries, or foreign fishing tourism. So in a nutshell, foreign fishing tourism can be defined as typically remote areas, rural, highly prized species, with foreign anglers that are looking for adventure, exclusivity, and willing to pay a premium. While these are not well studied, what we do know is that they have this potential to generate employment, provide income, as well as have this conservation bent to them. At the same time, the studies have shown that there is the risk of economic leakage, benefits can be unequally distributed, as well as conflicts between sectors and overexploitation. So as I mentioned, there's limited understanding of foreign fishing tourism in general, but when it comes to these large dam projects, there's even less information. So increasingly what we're seeing is interest in promoting foreign fishing tourism as a way to mitigate the impacts of these projects on rural communities. But there's very little evidence on how this works and what happens and what should happen. So what we know from tourism as an offset mechanism, it can create conflict, particularly when it comes to benefit sharing. And an important thing here is that when dealing with dam-affected communities, as I say, there's often a legacy of displacement. People feel like they've lost trust in the authorities, and that certainly has an impact on developing something in this sort of context. So with the increase in dams, I think it's an opportune time for us to look at this and see, you know, what works. And to do this, we looked at the case study of a recreational fishery in the Lesotho Highlands. So some background on the Lesotho Highlands Water Project itself. It's one of Africa's largest interbasin water transfer schemes. Currently it comprises two dams, Katsi Dam and Mohali Dam. They are currently busy with Podihadi Dam, and Tsudike and Ntohai will be built probably in 2035, but who knows? But at the end of the project, essentially you'll have 5 dams, over 200 k's of transfer tunnels, and the entire purpose of this project is to primarily export water to South Africa, as well as generate electricity for Lesotho. The project itself has had very mixed impacts on rural livelihoods. In some ways, electrification, road infrastructure has improved access to services, but at the same time, the dam has inundated many people's land. They've lost access to resources. And I think you can see from these pictures that it's a very rural landscape, very much based on traditional livelihoods, Access is limited. Some of these places you can only get to on horseback. So you've got a very socially vulnerable area. Government is now looking at developing fisheries in these water bodies. They do contain some popular angling species at the moment. So this provided an opportunity for us to look at this case study. The Machangwa Community Camp is located on the Bokong River, which is one of the arms entering Katsi Dam. You'll see here that there are two proximate villages, and I'll go into those a bit later, but those have important implications for the findings of the study. But the operation is the only dedicated recreational fishing operation as it stands in the area. It was established in 2012 in a partnership with the Tourism Council, local government. And essentially the model is based around catch and release fly fishing. And importantly, the developers have gone in with a community beneficiation approach. So this involves receiving rights to fish in exchange for levies, employment, development support, building infrastructure, schooling. And the lodge, as you'll see, it's quite, it's not large, it's 12 guests maximum. So it's quite an exclusive operation. So just a quick overview of the study. There were three objectives. To understand the fishery, we looked at participation, catch composition, and motivations of anglers. And this was important so that we could understand what's actually driving the demand for this fishery and how viable is it in other areas. So to understand that, we looked at catch records and angler questionnaires. To assess economic contribution and leakage, firstly, what we know, and some of the studies I've seen, is that these fisheries can generate revenue, but often so much of that goes out that it actually doesn't contribute to local economic development. So to do that, we looked at angler expenditures and the costs of running the operation, and we looked at both international, national, and local scales. And then finally, and importantly, given all the talk about the importance of human dimensions, we looked at community perspectives. We really wanted to understand what they've experienced so far, what are the challenges. So to do this, we had some focus group discussions, as well as some semi-structured interviews. So the fishery, we looked at the year from 2022 to 23. The season runs from around November to March. Over 3,000 fish were caught and released. The dominant species is the smallmouth yellowfish, as you can see in that picture. The second most dominant is rainbow trout, which is a non-native species. And then there's negligible volumes of native mudfish and non-native brown trout. But what's interesting is that the preference, angler preference is skewed very strongly towards yellowfish, and historically rainbow trout was seen as the preferred target species in this area. So over 234 anglers visited over the season. Most of them were from South Africa, but there were also anglers from other parts of Africa, the UK, Europe, as well as North America and the UAE. Most of the participants were male, around 45 years of age, and most of them were very experienced fishermen and considered themselves competent. You'll notice that there's only 2% novices there. But importantly, I think what these motivations show is that the two key ones were sight fishing and dry fly fishing. The rest were less important, and those were your fishing motivations. The other motivations, remote location and scenery, to be close to nature. An important one here that I don't think I've included is that the dam itself was not a major motivation for people to come, or at least the project. Some perspectives from the anglers on local fishes. Some of these results weren't very surprising. Interestingly, there was actually more acceptance of the activities of the capture fishery in the area. That being said, the way the fishery is managed at the moment, local fishers are asked to relocate when there are anglers there. And you'll see now that's created a bit of tension. But I think what this also points to is the fact that there's little education on the part of anglers as to the impacts of local fishers. Typically, recreational anglers feel like their impacts are much more limited compared to a subsistence fisher. But overall, the anglers thought that the fishery was very well managed. Some of the economic results, I think the important headline item here is that our local retention. So around $50,000 was retained in the local economy. When I say local economy, I mean the communities around the dam. Most of that money was from wages, gratuities, staff employment, community levies. But the key leakages, and we've seen this in other parts, is that local goods, well, what's required by tourists just isn't available locally. And another thing is that there's no local capacity to guide. So South Africans come in and wages are paid to them. So the key figure here, though, is that local retention at 50.8% is significantly higher than other comparable operations. I believe Ed's study in Angola was around 12%. So they're certainly doing something right. The community perspectives, this is interesting. So you'll see it's called the Mahangwa Community Camp, and the proximate village is Hamahangwa. And downstream you have Hasuani, Kalahari. A key thing here is that, and perhaps unsurprisingly, but despite the fact that the camp has really tried to engage communities, in Hasuani there were very divergent views and essentially quite negative reports about the operation. They felt that it was unfair, that benefits hadn't been shared properly. There was also a lack of awareness about the operation. I don't think that they'd been sensitized to what recreational fishing was and how it could benefit the fishery. And some of the participants from Hasuani were actually of the view that the angling was done purely to harvest diamonds from yellowfish. So they couldn't quite fathom that people would pay all of this money to catch and release a yellowfish. So what drives participation? The two key things were sight fishing and dry fly fishing. For those people that are fly fishers here, you'll understand these concepts, but essentially they're not widely available, but they're increasingly in demand and offered in very much bucket list locations, so places like New Zealand, flats, for example. So this fishery offers that at a much more affordable price. There's high satisfaction from the anglers, which is leading to repeat visits. But I do think that this misconception around the impacts of local fishers and their rights needs to be addressed. From an economic perspective, what we saw was that these small operations can generate contributions which are comparable to established destinations. And I'll give you an example. Sterkfontein Dam in South Africa is another sight fishing destination for this species. And this small 12-guest operation generates more money per year. As I mentioned, a relatively high local retention rate. And the key thing with the leakage being a lack of local goods and supply. It's a very remote area. And language gaps and cultural gaps. So that needs to be looked at if this model is going to be rolled out further. Finally, I'm getting there, Nina. So a key thing here is that because FFT has got, it's quite a specific niche product, essentially you've got, it can concentrate benefits quite spatially. So it can sound very nice on a broader scale, but often what people are looking for is quite niche and only located in very specific areas. So from a dam perspective, for example, you cannot go in and under the assumption that the same thing can be rolled out everywhere. And this really needs to be made clear to communities. I think the fact that the dam and the legacy of the dam is there is an important thing for globally, because that legacy really does reinforce mistrust and misconceptions about recreational fishing. At the moment, there is this divide between subsistence and recreational fishing and the values behind it, and that requires education. And ultimately, when it comes to rural communities, there's a number of competing tensions that will need to be looked at. So, to summarize what the camp got right, very much so the structured community beneficiation model, rotational employment, sharing revenue, bringing people in to make decisions. And this demonstrates that these small ventures can work in these contexts, but ongoing challenges, the exclusivity of the operation has created some conflict, some misconceptions, and this really needs to be actively managed. So finally, some lessons more globally. Importantly, at the pre-development stage, the lesson here was that the authorities didn't understand that yellowfish could be a main target species. And that was only picked up by the private sector. So it kind of points to the fact that in the pre-development stage for large dams, there needs to be closer consultation with industry and anglers. Structured, genuine community engagement, I say genuine, that's going to be very, very critical at an early stage. The interaction between fisheries is obviously important from a conflict point of view. And I say education on both sides because it's not just a case of going to the subsistence guys, but it's very much the recreational fishers and saying, these are the impacts of the fishery. An important one is looking at benefit sharing beyond the proximate communities. This could perhaps be looked at by supporting satellite enterprises around the dams. At the same time, promoting local sourcing and employment is important, but this needs to be balanced. It can't be onerous, which would deter investment. Language skills barriers, what we saw was that there was enthusiasm on the parts of community members to really participate and take up higher levels in the operation, but they were unable to communicate. So that is something that I believe African Waters are also looking at. And finally, broader education and awareness programs. As I mentioned, there's a lot of misconception around the operation. So that will help build trust and support long-term integration. Thanks, Nina.